into the program, kind of the training on communication, communication training, but communication that would be, conductive or conducive to thinking while, communicating. So kind of, it's not like we depart from this model of like image of communication that there is this, one who is the speaker, and there is a message, and there is a receiver, and there is a channel, and it sounds like, okay, the message is already there, somewhere prepared and like pre-thought, and you come to that receiver, you just, sound the message, and the message has been delivered, something like that. So in such a process, whereas thinking is like before, right? If there is anything, I have already prepared something I know, and I just want to communicate it to the other. The question is, how could we in our program teach communication and focus on like select or focus on ways of communicating and kind of be like communication behavior or approaches or skills which would emphasize this like or enable an enhanced thinking of the participating people in the communicating process. So that was the question. I was trying to imagine how like training or course could address, because when you think about like what communication training are there available, I thought of two types. One is more like maybe not so frequent anymore, but maybe still it's like more like rhetorical training. You kind of learn to like conquer the world with your conceptualization or your language or your speech, right? And you go to the training which is like in articulation, in argumentation, in the kind of coherence of the, I don't know how to call it, like a narrative, like you will do it so well that you will win the debate, and you will like the whole crowd will just follow you, and you will just speak, and everybody will just clap, and it will be perfect. So, okay, there is still training like that, but it's like kind of a Julius Caesar, approach. Or, yeah, so like kind of I conquer the world, and this is the communication.
Debate classes.
Something like that. So another side of the spectrum is like so that one is pure speaking, right? It's pure like speech, pure like I have something and I just impose it on, or we debate, but somebody will win and somebody will win. The other end of the spectrum would be this story of Narcissus and Echo. Echo being the lady who's just like admiring the Narcissus, and is kind of reflect like pure reflection or pure reception of what the other is. She's nodding very well. You're doing very good. Kind of yes. Like I learn to resonate. I learn to reflect and feedback. So like. When I have this training in empathetic communication, for example, how you like match the body language, and how you like nod when you're not, how you build a rapport and so on. So that would be like the other side of like what a communication training could provide, how to kind of receive, what the other is. And of course, like
which is already something,
probably it's more useful, I would say, the skill than the previous one, but maybe depending on I don't know, gender identification, I would say. But
that is a very rude assumption. And I'm speaking of the other gender perspective.
Third gender
perspective. But anyway, like if we are speaking about like how to teach communication, is of course it's neither, right? We should have another concept of like what the communication should like be composed of or like consist of. So I have some ideas about like what could it be. was thinking, you know, as like, kind of trying to build like a model. You know? But there's like, of course, you know, laughing at myself, like thinking even about it, because when you know, like what model could it be? Like, you know, like you have this geometrical kind of symmetry in it, right? You have names which ideally should be like names of the corners of the model, or kind of axis of the model, which should be starting with the same letter ideally, and should be like similar. Like you have fight, flight, freeze, and faint apparently. So and then of course it should have an acronym, and like will be set. You know, like the more like beautiful it is geometrically and linguistically and grammatically, the more true it is, isn't it? You know, and like the more complete and will be it. So when I thought about this, I thought like, how could I, you know, invent a way of like conveying what I want to do without sounding like a model at all. So like what I would like to propose is kind of an experiment. How like on this, you know, like meta level experiment, like we have the content of what I want to say, which is like basic, and we have half an hour. But you know, like how can you do that, like without building a model and without pretending to build a model? So this is the idea I want to show you. So the visual representation would be something like a projection, you know, mirror. That you have no idea what my model is, but you have some shapes in front of you, so you will.
Oh, this is very good.
So you will be able to place that model the way it speaks to you on whatever is in front.
I'm missing some colors.
The model looks like this, okay?
Everyone else sees them.
You want to see the blue?
You see the yellow and
Yeah, very
Another
yellow.
thing is, like, if you
Very
want to
yellow.
take notes, you have like little strips here,
Now
so
we
you
have
can.
yellow.
You have yellow. You can just distribute, please, because
not
it's
yellow.
share those. So this is for you to take notes if you want to like place the ideas.
I want them all.
If you want to place those ideas I'm speaking about, you will like to note them somewhere. You will need to name them and give them labels. So if you are into like acronym and the same letter, this is your job, not mine. I will just tell you.
Them? Name them?
Name the things I will be speaking about. So like I have like a few, like 4 ideas, or no, 6 ideas, okay? Some kind of observations, and you can build your model as you wish, as you feel like. If you want to have a model. Okay? So and what I want to share is. Does everybody have everything? Mm-hmm. It's not true.
It's
And
false?
This is the 7th F, false. Fight, flight, freeze, faint,
Yeah, and
false,
not
and then the
false,
fumble.
yeah. It's not true at all, and it's not what's important in communication. It's not what you need to learn.
Too much
Something,
information.
and it's absolutely subjective, absolutely personal, and it's just like because I get to speak, I'll just tell you what I think. And it's I was like I'm interested in human communication, and when I do it, I observe a lot of what I am doing and what other people are doing, and I find it fascinating. And I find it as something like I want to learn, and I'm like learning it and kind of consciously experimenting with it. So I would like to tell you, share with you 6 ideas or images or concepts that I pay attention to. There are some things the ways I like to think about communication situations. And some kind of behaviors or attitudes I personally appreciate. So when I see that in people, or I see I'm trying to do it, I like it. So I'm this is something I like to do. So maybe you know, like we'll be able to build a model of it, and that would be the like thinking with exercise that I kind of, you know, like share, and you know what it's supposed to mean, you know, and how, you know, and how to organize it into something coherent. So
So first to create, then we hear yours?
No,
She's going to speak and
I'm
we
going
do
to
it
speak.
real time.
and you just, you know, like take your visual note instead of my, you know, PowerPoint presentation where it would be already drawn and named. You just draw a name for yourself. If you are up to it, it's not. You don't have to take it if you don't know. So. First, like thought I had, like I would replace this dichotomy between you know, this Julius Caesar, you know, conqueror, and echo lady, you know, just echoing, with a different like sort of dichotomy, which I would say it's something like, you know, like when you think about good listening. I would, good listening, for me, the definition of good listening would be speaking. Not just, you know, like, speaking. So, like, the opposite, you know, listening, speaking. So, like, very good listening is speaking. But it's, like, it's not just, you know, like, speaking. It's like, when, and the opposite, very good speaking is listening. So this is like something I'm thinking a lot. So when you are a listener, you know, when you are like excellent listener, you are so, you know, supportive and helpful for the speaker, that you are as if like doing that with the person. You know? So like. It's not that you like take over and you'll do the speaking. It would be like too much of that. But it's like it's listening, which is kind of, you know, like working with and supporting and helpful. You know? So somebody explains something to you. And the way, you know, like you can, you know, like describe it behaviorally. You can say, okay, you do nodding, and you do this, and you like, you know, interject some small questions, and you do and so on. But if you go to a training and you just learn those behaviors, it's so superficial, you know, and it's so kind of, okay, I just asked the, you know, like the question, you know, I just phrased, you know, like I just made something into the phrase of like, which sounds like a non-violent communication, you know, phrase. It's so superficial, but you know, I guess it's nicely phrased and so on. So it like then it's like it's not listening which supports speaking. It's like listening as playing of a role. But the ultimate listening would be like indistinguishable from like what speaker needs to do the speaking. And like conversely, you know, like the speaking which is seamless, it can be only seamless when the person who's speaking has done so much listening to the person or to the group or to the kind of, you know, the situation they are in, that they know exactly what to say. So they know like the language. They know, you know, like the train of thought which is like happening in the listening, you know, like system, right? They know so well that this is and where does it come from? It comes from speaking. So and it's not like sequential that because I've done listening, I know, and now I can do the speaking, because like you are listening to the reaction, you are listening like to the body language, you are listening to you know, like how what you are saying is being received, and this is why your speech can be good, can really do the thing. So it's kind of like one is built of like it's composed of the other essence. There are not two concepts. It's just, you know, like one.
Like a membrane, yeah.
it's, you know, it's your model. You know? So you can visualize it as a memory. So this is the first image I wanted to share. The second one is that I think like in communication that helps in thinking, and like something what I experience as like really meaningful, you know, like encounter with somebody when I communicate with somebody is when I feel that our attention or the attention of my listener is not so much on the object that we are speaking about. You know, like so I'm presenting some like idea, and you have people like so focused on the contour of what I'm speaking about, as if there's like the third object in between us, and like we are just, you know, speaking about it. So like it's a ready packaged thing, but on the like something much more subtle. It's on the generation, like, you know, like generative process of how this object is being constructed while we communicate. So like to give you an example, you know, like being like completely focused on the object I'm describing would be asking a question like, but is it more like this or is it more like this, or like how do you define this, you know, and like, you know, kind of about this, right? And like in a communication which is more focused on the generative process of how this object comes into being, it's more like, you know, like more to the thinker than the thought, you know. So like.
I have an example.
Yes.
I just remember when you were talking. I remember one very important person in my life, and please don't ask me to.
Oh, please do.
and
That was good listening.
and I was talking about the garden I visited. It was the botanical garden, and I was really like, I loved it very much. And I said, oh my goodness, I was in this garden, and you know, and it was quite a lot of details in it. And this person said, looks like you really like gardens. And I know it sounds like nothing for you at the moment, but then I realized, fuck, I really like gardens. You know, it was like, it isn't the knowledge I haven't, but somehow it was something what I thought about this person that it was really perceptive. I don't know if it makes sense for, but it was like, oh yes, that's something what is important for you, but also that's the kind of quality of you. Something what,
Yes.
it's very simple, but I really, that for me that's the example of what you just said.
So it's like listening or observing the thinker or the speaker, not only the thought and the speech, what is being spoken. You know? So it's kind of, you know, like you have, you know, those kind of reactions like, this is an interesting train of thought. Like, what made you say it? Like, what makes you think so? You know, like, what kind of, you know, it's not like, because you're like, it sounds like a super, you know, objective model that you are describing, and then a person asks you, why do you find this important? You know, or why do you like choose to like phrase it this way? And it like, and it immediately like the effect is that it invites thinking about it. It's not, it doesn't invite hearing it. It invites reflecting and it invites exploring. And the same, like it goes two ways, because like it's the same in speaking, when you like include in what you are speaking about the generative process of how you came to the thing you are speaking about. You don't say it's just, you know, out there and people behave this way and this is how it always is. You just say, like, you know, like, I'm observing it. For me, it's important. You know, it captures my attention and also my UI and so on. So this kind of ownership of the object opens up a possibility for the object of being flexible or mutable or, you know, like evolving, because we are naming and we are kind of touching the process, how it's being generated. So why not regenerate it? Why not modify it and so on? So that was the second. The third thing is something I'm consciously trying to learn. So like when I'm communicating with somebody, I'm like kind of, part of my attention goes to this behavior of mind, which I would like to have, which I just enjoy. It's I would say it's kind of speaking the language of the other. You know? And so, you know, like I'm speaking now about, like, we have those, you know, conceptual discussions, theoretical discussions, and so on. And of course, like, we all, like, if you like go outside of like any discipline, and we have this transdisciplinary discussions, when people are free to choose their topics, everybody is speaking about the same thing. You know, they're speaking about humans, society, problems. Like, it's on a general level, it's always like this is the biggest friend, because it's interesting. So like, and we are observing sort of the same reality. So we kind of do speak, like, we share the world together. We speak about this world, but we have completely different concepts and language and categories and how they interrelate and those different models of this reality. You know? So of course, when you listen to somebody speaking, giving you their theory, you have, like, it does, you know, call out your own conceptualization, right? It does, you know, kind of translate to your language. They say A, and for you it means tree. They say, you know, flower. For you it means, you know, chicken. You know, and so on. And it's not one-to-one, it's just, you know, like, it's a different map. And what we were speaking previously about, you know, those scientific discussions, is just, you know, bumping one paradigm on another. You know, like, we have different conceptualizations, we have different names for things, and instead, like, of going to the next step immediately, like, what can we, like, do together, like, so much energy is wasted on, like, whose name will be on the top, you know, whose category will be used by everybody, you know. So what I like to learn, like, what I like to try is kind of listen to the person, like, concepts, and just go on with the communication and say what I would like to say using their language. You know, because I would like, they are explaining something, I would like to add, which comes from my way of thinking, but instead of, like, introducing my categories, I would translate what I want to say to their language, and I will go ahead and say it, you know, just as an activity. So something, you know, like, I find meaningful. The next one. It has something to do with like, when you are describing the world and categorizing is one thing. Another thing is you are describing yourself and categorizing. And in communication, like in meeting another person, like, there are two concepts being consolidated. And one is of yourself, and the other concept is of the other. And when I speak to you, I have an image of what you are built on what you've said about yourself. So let's say we, like, just, you know, like, meet occasionally, you know, during, I don't know, a period of 5 years, and we communicate. This is, you know, how my perception of you has been shaped, you know, like, by all those meetings and what you said. I build this reference, like, I have it, right? So, and then let's say, you know, like, you say something that contradicts or doesn't really fit into the image of you I have. So you said you are a vegetarian, you know, one day, and another day I see you eating steak, you know, or whatever contradiction, you know, it is. You say you're a vegetarian, and another day you say you just hate animals, like, you know, stupid examples. But what I really like to.
Oh, this is why you eat their food?
So, like, you know, like, I really like to, like, I really enjoy, you know, like, speaking to people who don't, like, insist on coherence of myself. And I'm super sensitive to it. Like, I kind of remember what I said about myself, and sometimes I know, okay, there will be, like, a question coming up, like, how is it possible you said something different? And when that person, you know, like, doesn't ask this question, I super enjoy it. You know, like, it's so freeing and refreshing not to be, like, linguistically cornered into being a coherent persona. You you know, like being a narrated, like complete narrated self, but just having ambiguity and difference in me, and having like both qualities, you know, like linguistically seem contradictory. You know? So I like to like not like try not to do it to other people, because I enjoy it like when they don't do it to me, if it wasn't too complicated. And the last one, myself, I think, is like this kind of assertiveness of like not letting the other corner you in this way. You know, like insist on being consistent.
I missed that.
So like when you know, like let's say Cadell once tells me that he like loves philosophy and hates science, and the other day.
But I never said that.
And another day says like the opposite,
Okay.
and I would say, you know, I would do the cornering thing. I would say like, Cadell, how is it possible? Like, you know, like this, like, you know, like make your mind, like, you know, like choose something. It's like, you know, like previously you said something else. You know, like being inconsistent. How come? You know, as if inconsistency was, you know, such a crime. You know.
But what's the difference, Marta, between the previous one and this one?
Because the one that I want to say is just going to happen, and he would say something like, you know, this like.
Okay.
So like not allowing to be like coherent by expectations. You know, just saying, you know, like deal with it. You know, like I do. You know? So something like, you know, like being like assertive in not being forced to like collapse into a concept, into a form which is already, you know, defined, but just, you know, like being allowed, like, you know, like asserting your you know, like you know.
You want to be a wave function.
Something like that.
What?
A wave
Wave
function?
function.
She wants it. Yeah, she wants it. Yeah.
So because, you know, like I think like if you think about thinking, only then communication like can be coinciding with thinking, which is free, which is non-determined and non-closed, you know, before we've started communicating. So you can kind of discover something while being in contact with the other, and not only like alone sitting, you know, in your room and thinking something new, prepackaging it, you know, polishing it, languaging it, and only then bringing it to the other, right? Does it make sense? Do you have the super shiny model in front of you?
Yeah.
Okay.
But you said 6 and there I noted 5. Did I skip 4?
Are you now doing her
I'm
asking
doing
for
the
consistency?
Oh,
You should
yes,
Marta, you should tell her.
Bravo.
Exercise.
Thank you. I told you I'm not so good at it.
And yeah.
Helen? No, I said 6 because I counted the listening as speaking and speaking as listening as 2, but it's kind of 1. So in that
want you
sense,
to be
5.
disappointed to only have 5 in the end.
So now please have a look at what you have in front of you, and
Could you maybe quickly repeat the last one? Because
the last one
really-
would be the assertive, not allowing the other, you know, to force you to be coherent, narrative, you know,
yeah.
persona.
And could you repeat what we are meant to do on the yellow papers?
If you want to write something and the page is too dark and it doesn't, like, you cannot see it, if you write it on the
Did you
page.
say you wanted, I mean, I kind of, you see me?
Oh my God.
Do you want, you said the same first letter, or were you
I
joking?
was joking.
Okay.
Maybe it shouldn't have. It's just, you know, like I said, I won't give you the model, so just build your model and like make it nice for yourself, like speaking to yourself. And now when you think about this model, I have a gift for you.
He's the coordinator. He's not the participator.
The gift for you actual cash.
What is that? Are we being bribed? What?
I want to like give you some. This is what you will get. It's investment sort like resources that you could use. Like imagine it's like now the model transform into like a competency shop. You just come, you just pay.
Not
And
competent. No.
Those are like those behaviors. You can buy them. You can like you invest. Like it's not
You
buying.
can buy it
it's
from yourself.
from
a shop.
from the model. You know, like it's out there in the model, and you have this investment fund that you like. If you choose something to invest in and choose wisely, like you select something that to like you put your money in, you will get so much back. You know, so much like it will like give you so much back. You know, like as
I evaluate the value I want to.
refund of investment, like what's called return of investment. So it might be that like you choose a place where when you apply those like investment, it will like transform all your communication and all your relation like with yourself and others and your thinking and your genius and whatever or it will affect all other competences. So that it's just one investment. So you can take one big coin and one small coin, and this is for you, so you don't have to return. And you have also
Before presenting.
Yes, go. One and one.
this is what I want. Go ahead. Yeah, I just want some.
Wie ging gek geschenkt?
And when you have your coins, you can just invest them by gluing them into the places where should.
Can I glue them in my pocket?
If this is where you want to invest, go ahead.
It's bubble gum and I can chew it.
You can try, let's be open to experience.
And she just encouraged you to poison yourself?
So you invest in something in the model that you want to grow in yourself. You invest one small coin and one big
In my
coin.
model or in the model that you're going to use?
In the model you have in front of you.
Ich benutze eher selten Bastel.
Do I have to invest in my model or no?
You need to invest in one of the concepts
That
that
I
you
chose,
wrote
that I
down
wrote,
in
yes.
your model.
In your own?
And if you want to invest something in something else, you
Choose
can add
one
it to
small
the
and one big coin and please forward the brush.
You have to invest.
Der empty one or?
That's what I heard.
Der empty one or? Nein, nur eine. Du brauchst eine mit sehr große kleine.
Is it Polish? Old coin?
Still good coins. We don't have euro in Poland.
No?
Yeah.
That's better.
So Balthazar, when you go to Poland, if you took Polish coins, you can use them. They're still good.
Oh yeah, and he took quite a number of money, quite a sum of money. Not just as me the grosh, but it's
The five
a
and the one.
serious lot. It's like a beer, is it?
Six.
Oh, it's close to the beer, not in the square, but
Is it clear what's
A zip of a beer.
Yeah.
A zip of a beer.
The one I need to invest, I want to invest more, and the one I want to invest less.
But both of them you
Huh?
want to invest.
But
Yeah,
both
so
of
it's
them
number
you
one
want.
and number two.
Two.
Oh,
One,
I
one
have
small,
one
one small one, or one small
the
layer,
only
one
one.
big coin.
No, this is so precious. It's very
You are
small,
already perfect, so.
but
this
this
is my one.
This is my art.
And put it in front of you, the thing, because there will be return of investment immediately.
And I ran
I'll
out of
show
yellow
you.
stitches when you went away.
Is it?
you're also quite good.
Oh, we need to glue them too. Right. Glue them.
How about your investment?
20 seconds.
I'm just an active spirit. And I have no substantial
Encounter.
content.
Uh-oh. Uh-oh. Fishing for compliments.
No, then you just accept it.
Can I ask
Okay.
one
Okay, okay. I thought so too, but now that you are saying it...
Exercising
minutes,
this
but I
exercising this on hands.
One more
Not
step.
looking for coherence.
So one more step now or one?
One more step now.
No, you cannot go smoking.
No.
Is everybody ready?
Yeah.
With their investment plan?
Yeah.
I'll show you a super quick and efficient trick to learn it and to get the return of investment immediately. So that will mean that once you leave this room, you already have this effect on you working. Ready?
Sounds like a magic trick.
Ready? Okay, the method is like, it has an acronym, of course. Which is RC, very nice acronym. And it's called the Ultimate Competency Development Methodology, Rapid and Cool.
Developed by Marta.
That's the end.
Cool.
Yeah. Trademark. So how it's done, when you know what you want to achieve, let's take 5 minutes of, guess what? Thinking about it. Okay? Just think about it, how it would be, what would it take, how would it feel, and what would be changed, and whatever question you find appropriate to the thinking process about how you are going to just behave this way.
Write down the 4 verbs, what it would
Just think.
Just make me change my...
Also sie hatte gewisse Verhaltensmuster gehabt. Und ich hatte auch solche Ziele quasi. Die freie Länge betont, wie wichtig das Ganze ist. Das ist interessant, also Inhalt. Lecker. What do you mean by the first question?
If you did it, what would get changed? Like what change would it make?
Okay.
Maybe you succumb to the group pressure and give your own or yeah, you know. You got my appreciation just changed.
We don't know what direction.
Let's still think, okay? We'll discuss thinking. magic is done. Now we all have.
And more of the city.
That's it. Would anyone want to say something or comment? Sure.
To present.
You can. Like, what would you like to say?
I've made an investment in to not aim too hard for a certain object between speaker and listener. I have a tendency to do that and to try to really focus and have a goal and to achieve that goal. And it's I think liberating in a way for myself, but also for the ID under development. To leave it a little bit and maybe to pick it a little bit at the periphery and maybe not be so directed to what you think at that point is the center of it. But to move around a little bit and allow the other one to do the same. So that was my main investment.
So, sorry?
When I listened to what you said, I wrote some things that came into my mind. Some of them were in what you said, and some of them I would like to add to what you said.
Mm-hmm.
So I would begin with two concepts that are like they provide each other another level of depth, and they are connected to all others. But it's there must be a relation between the expectation and the emergence of what happened. So one needs to be in contact with his expectation. What do I want in this communication to happen? What is the message I want to deliver? What is the impression I want to create?
Mm-hmm.
But then again, one needs to be, I need to be open for the emergence of what happened and to see all the differences between what I wanted and what happened. Not to be too frustrated, not to be too content, and always to move between the expectation and the emergence of the thing. And this is where the flexibility should arise.
And interestingly, the same letter.
Yes, the double E connection. And then I added some other things that are connected to what you said. One of them, I think, it's very important. It's abundance. One needs to be ready to invest a lot in something that may yield less. Maybe it will yield more, but you need to have the abundance of communication and trial and error and the frustration and the enjoyment of it, but not to be too limited or too like, okay, I'm going to put only 5 zloty here. Come with the 100. Maybe it's not really a good strategy for investment, but it's a good strategy for communication.
So abundance in communication would be like, you know, your attention,
Generosity.
like generosity of attention, of time, of like whatever.
Yes, and to be a spender, you know, not to be a calculating every
I think
year.
there is nothing that kills better interaction than, you know.
Yeah, being very narrow, and then as you said, to be expressive in how you listen and in how you interact and in how you think, and to be open for reflection. And one more thing that is very important, I call it respect. You have to respect the other and yourself in the sense of creating the space for someone to be, and then to interact with him or her, and then where change can happen. So this is my model. You can take it.
I have it on the video.
So you're going to hear a lot of the same from me as Balthazar. But I think there's two very different parts of communication that need to be separated out, which is, well, there's the overarching, like, what do we mean by communication? Because there's so many different forms of it, right? But there's the before you communicate, and then the actions while you are communicating. And I think they are very separate, because one is a mindset and approach to how you produce those communications, so that gets into the openness, that gets into the willing to adapt. But beforehand, for me, is where most of the thinking occurs, which is around clarity and like, what are you trying to achieve? What what does your audience want? I think of communications originally as like a one-to-many if you're trying to talk to people. Like, what do you want the audience to do? What do you want them to get out of it? Who is the audience? Which really then gets down to, I call it an empathy map. Like, do you actually understand your audience? There's lots of times that people communicate and try to, this story moved me, so therefore I'm going to tell it to you, but you don't share my norms, you don't share my values, you don't share my language. And so therefore, you know, you expect the audience to be moved, and like everyone just gives you blank stares because no one connects to it or not. So the idea of building empathy to your audience and understanding what their norms are, what their values are, what their common language is. You know, if you're a PhD talking to people that did not graduate university about a complex topic, you're going to have to talk about it very differently than if you talk about it with other PhDs that are experts in your field. And I think having that understanding beforehand of really thinking, what is the most effective message to effectively do what you're attempting to do or to achieve what you're attempting to do is a thing that goes implicit with a lot of people rather than explicit. And because of that, I watch a lot of communications go really, really badly or not have the effect they're supposed to have because nobody actually went through that process. They just like thought about it for 2 seconds, like, great, this reflects my values, this reflects what I believe, and so therefore I'm going to do it. So I just think those are separate things, and then everything Balthazar said for like the during in your mindset is what I had as well.
For me, the main word would be relationship. I divided these 5 topics into 2 groups. One, I would say, is relationship with oneself, and the other one is relationship with the other. So in the self, it's just like to have self-love and self-respect, not to be cornered or not to be labeled, and just like on not willing to meet the expectation of the other. And as for the relationship with the other, I think it's all about attunement. It's just like finding that space where you can resonate. So it's benevolence. You said that word, or abundance. So basically, it doesn't matter really what the other is saying. It's just like it's like today when we had this long discussion with ourselves. The content, you know, is not really important. It's just the quality of how we share stuff. And basically everybody could express himself or herself or their self in a way that we all feel good and peaceful. So I think it's a great quality. I will try to develop myself.
Thank you for sharing.
Anybody else?
Yeah, first of all, I really love it. I really love it. It means I really like this idea that you brought me something abstract and nice and asked us to build a model, because actually the building of a model while listening to something, it's actually igniting and activating the thinking process. And then the moment that you have this kind of artifact, it allows the reflection. So in this sense, I really like the structure of the module. I think it's very interesting. Now, I took a very minimalist approach from what you said, which is basically to, it emphasizes how to look at communication as a generative process, where this sense, also the abstraction and also the thinking goes towards this generative process. And the generative process can happen outside, in the sense of it being in the live communication between us, or it can happen a priori in the way I relate to the communication as an existence that already influence. And this correlates to what you just said, because I need to craft whatever is that I'm saying to an address. And by doing that, I need to rethink it, and I need to re-articulate it, and I need to... So the generative process is still there. And so this idea, I like very much this idea of speaking, listening, listening, speaking, like it being one, a negative of the other in this sense. And I think also that somehow in my model, the generative process demands a non-coherency, in the sense that if you are too much within the expected image, known, familiar, you name it, the process cannot be generative. It doesn't matter how nice or whatever else. So there must be this glitch in the matrix, or this glitch that breaks the known, because otherwise, to refer to what we discussed on beer, there's very little thinking. There is a lot of bouncing and things which are already there, but the engine does not really ignite.
There must be a crack.
There must be something.
I was impressed with how you put it, that good listening is speaking and that good speaking is listening. And for me, it refers maybe to compassion and oneness. And I like that both listening and speaking are oriented towards another person who's in front of you. It's not an isolated act anyway, that what you're doing there, but it's together with another person, and how you put it, I think, reflects really good on the okay, if it is together with another person, then I should be in that moment attached to that person, or in this process maybe.
And one question, you just took two very contradictory positions in the beginning, but you didn't take the maybe more dialectical perspective on the works of dialogue, communication by Bohm or Huber, but I guess you are completely familiar with them. But you just didn't know, because you like this stage, right? Okay. My investment is on the ambiguity in a person, which may have a result on the richness of the objects and models through the generative process. But the leverage is the ambiguity in a person. I like that because I never heard that before in communication processes. But of course it has some resonance with, again, from this point of view, because the idea is that we have this picture of ourselves as being congruent in the past, in the present, and in the future. But it might be that, and at least I have this experience, the Stefan of the past is not the same Stefan as today.
I never had the experience that the Stefan of the morning is not the Stefan of the evening, but it could happen. Right? We're going there.
Depends what were the liquids that you consumed.
Yeah, liquids and other substances.
Yes.
Yeah. Need to take care of that. No, but seriously, it is indeed that we have these changes. Even maybe they may be not so obvious, because I think, maybe this is only my experience of myself and the communication partners so far, they are not like changing their value systems like in 180 degrees of views, but slightly changing it. What's it called? Rearranging it in a way, because we are in a constant re-evaluation of our values to the outer world we perceive, I think. And so I like the idea of the ambiguity, not only in a group or diversity in a group, but also within oneself and the other who you communicate with. Thank you.
I think we haven't heard still from no pressure, but I know who they are.
You'll be noted.
You can keep your ambiguity.
They will.
You should have told them, Marta.
No, actually I will follow. That will be the learning. Okay, so I stress assertive freedom, and it's a kind of joy in it, and somebody mentioned earlier, it's connected with respect to yourself, but also kind of letting yourself be a little bit, lighter, and that's something. But I somehow, in the process of thinking, it changed, like reinforcing inner impulse. Like sometimes I have this impulse that I don't want it, or I want it, or but then you can treat it differently. You can say, oh yes, it is something important, or you can just, okay, and then you follow. Yeah. So for me, this somehow treating it more respectfully, or just, so that's this part of
like emergent something new in you that you want to allow.
Yeah, and that somehow. I have this experience with creative ideas, that when there's something creative appears in the global, then it may disappear in the same moment, unless someone else supports it. Unless there is another and when it's appreciated, then really, and if there is two who like it, then it goes. So this sense of support is absolutely crucial also in own impulses. Yeah? So that is this thing. And then I will smoothly move to the other one, which is, I call this one, it was about this noticing the thinker. So I said it was like reading what is between the lines for me, but for me it's very simple. It's about appreciation, presence, and appreciation person. So it's more. It's also being less skeptical, something like that. Being a little bit more. It's so simple that I feel stupid talking about it, but it's like really enjoying that this person is sharing it. So it's very basic, but it's kind of attitude towards the other person. That's it.